computer. All right. Ta-da!
Okay, gang. So we are in chapter 3. We're going to actually go through 3 and 4, 5 and 6 since we didn't meet last week. And so they were really short chapters, so I think we can get it accomplished. I don't know about you, but it's interesting as you're reading these, especially 3 through 6 here. It was very connective to one another, like for the chapter before, and he's just building this case. And every time he says something about the connectivity or these thoughts or how our brain's wired, you're like, well, of course. But then as he goes on, you're going, wait, I never thought of it like that. So, I mean, the idea of self-talk, the idea of self-information is all over this thing. So in chapter 3 at the beginning, he talks about the classic how-tos. And, he lists, I think it was like 60 of them or something like that, like 2 pages worth of how-tos, how to be successful. And he calls it the how-tos. So, one of those how-tos were, dress for success, which how many times we hear that in high school? One of the how-tos were, have a positive attitude, believe in God. And all these things that they was talking about, he said all these books have been written on these subjects. And it's true. You go into Barnes & Noble's right now to I think they have a self-help section, don't they? They have a self-help section, I'm pretty sure. And so they have a self-help section, and like everything he listed here, you can probably find a book there for him. I mean, I can just visualize it in my head. And he says, so why do we need more books? If all these have found the answer to a successful life, then to reaching our goals, reaching our dreams, then why do we need any more books? And he says, because there's some missing ingredients. And I thought that this was really awesome. At the end, I'll go ahead and tell you what I thought. Are you
going to give it away?
No. The best part, no, there's 3. But the best part, what he said was that all those solutions that he listed just previously, they're all external solutions. And I started looking back at his list. I'm like, they are. Everything's about like your actions and telling your what to do and all these things. And so he goes, the problem with that is there's no permanence. All external solutions are just temporary. He said none of those books, when you wake, this is great. When you wake up in the morning, none of those group books are going to jump off the shelf and say, hey, good morning. Good morning. Remember, dress for success. I mean, like, doesn't happen. I mean, and it's interesting that, he was talking through, there's no permanence for a lot of these self-help methods, even though they're all good. And he claims if you can do them all, you'll be successful and you'll find success, you'll find happiness, all those things. But you can't, there's not permanence there. And the second thing is, none of these address how the brain works. And he says the number 2 thing, missing ingredients, is how the brain works. The brain runs the ship, so we must understand it, which makes total sense. Later on in chapter 5, he says the subconscious doesn't know any difference between poor and rich, good and bad. It only knows what you tell it. And so the subconscious wasn't designed to think on its own and go, oh, I know what rich or poor is. It's just because of what you've told it. So we got to know how the brain runs, because it's the ship. It's the rudder. It's things that makes us go. And then finally, the new programming vocabulary. And we've all heard probably in high school or probably in college or something that the brain is like a big computer. And so this is no new analogy. It's no stretch to the analogy, but it's really, really good how he talks about the programming language. And if you've ever know anything about programming, when you look at a website, behind that website is all a bunch of zeros and ones and answer, weird, crazy signs and symbols and stuff that once you put them all in the right order and the right, sequence, it pops out this beautiful website. So he goes, we got to just switch the programming. And the old program, which we talked about last time we met, the old negative things, the 77% of the things that we receive in our brain is and tell ourselves is typically negative. So he goes, we got to switch the old programming with new positive programming. He said the method that encompasses all 3 of these, the permanence, the knowledge of the brain, and the new programming, is self-talk. And I think, at least what I'm seeing, and I haven't read ahead, and not on purpose. Yeah. On purpose, I haven't read ahead. But I have a feeling that this idea of self-talk is going to be a continual thing throughout the entire book. And so as I was kind of processing this first chapter, it is interesting because we've all heard that saying, like the definition of insanity is to do the same thing again and again, expecting different results, or whatever. And so I'm like, that makes sense, because if you don't have permanence, if you don't understand the brain, if you're not rewiring your programming and you're going to do the same thing, expecting something else to happen, then how in the world is anything ever going to change? And then as we get into chapter 4, he kind of goes into the computer analysis even more so. And I find this pretty interesting. And I think you could actually break down each one of these and talk about them the whole entire time we're here. The monitor, our monitor. So the monitor you're looking at right now, your monitor is your appearances and your actions. Okay. He says the keyboard is the input through the senses. So the keyboard for us is our senses. The input that comes through our senses, our touch, taste, smell, hearing, seeing, vision, whatever. Those are the keyboard. It imprints on us. And then the hard disk are things stored in our subconscious. So the hard disk is ultimately our subconscious. So he says with all that, if you're thinking about a computer, and if you're built like a computer, using this analogy, he says your brain then has to be the control center. And he gives a great visual of you walk into, and it's funny, what's the movie the kids like so much? Inside Out. Inside Out. That's all I thought about the entire time when I was reading this chapter is Inside Out. I don't know if many of you have seen Inside Out. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite Disney movies. I'm not going to lie. I really like usually like all of them. Like if the kids want to go, I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's go to the Disney movie. Like I'll tell them when it's coming out. It's like, it's coming out on 22nd. Let's go. So anyway, because I'm a big kid. But if the movie Inside Out, they have these different emotions: anger, joy, fear, and I forget what the mean girl is. Anyway, she's like sassy and stuff. I don't know.
Sassy.
Envy maybe, or something like that. She's green. So
Okay.
Anyway, but they're in the brain, which is like and it's like a control center, and they control this, how this little world inputs and outputs process information. So that's what I thought about. I thought about Inside Out. So if you've seen the movie, you get it. Your brain is the control room, and he says there's all these switches up and down, and these inputs through the subconscious come in, and it in a half of a heartbeat switches, flicker on and flicker off and tell the body what to do, tell you what to do. And the brain is mostly there to keep you alive. But he said there's something also that comes in other than just the things that tell you, hey, I'm hungry, or the ouch, that hurts, is the thoughts. And he goes into this idea of thoughts in the next chapter as well. But he said thoughts are programs for the brain. So if you have a thought, that thought will, as we see in the next chapter, turns into often a belief, and that imprints in the brain and programs the brain. So leading into chapter 5, best title ever, we learn to believe. And I like it's a learned skill to believe. By the way, if you hear our children jumping in here in a minute,
they're knocking on our door.
We couldn't get them down in time, and
locked.
Literally we just locked our door. This is how much we care about you.
No, Piper.
Like we are denying parental responsibilities.
We just
right
gave
now.
them iPads.
We give them iPads. We give them TV. They don't know what to do with themselves. They're like, it's 6:45 and we're not doing our nightly chores. We're sitting here doing iPads. Anyway, chapter 5, he talks about when he was a kid and he wanted to play in the band a whole lot. And I know all about this because I was in band and played sports.
Yeah.
I did both.
Mm-hmm.
I made band cool. Mm-hmm. So anyway, and you married me. Mm-hmm. So anyway, he wanted to play in the band. He was 12 years old. And when he goes to play tryout, the music instructor hands him this instrument. He does terrible, like train wreck. And then he overhears this other guy, this music director, talk with another person. Says, this guy, him, the author of this book, he is doesn't only have not only have music talent, but he will never play a musical instrument. He's pretty much awful. He remembers that. And to this day, like he remembers that. And he says that really, every time he wanted to do that again, he just told himself, it was a thought that he had at a young age, that I can't do that. And it's fascinating because he comes into this idea of how many of us says, oh, I'm just terrible with names. Like that's really simple, right? That's just a simple phrase that we say. I'm just terrible with names. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. That's just terrible with names. The funny thing is, and Cassie will tell you, and it's really being a pastor, you kind of have to do this, but like I'm really good at remembering names and weird situations and weird things about people. Like I can remember like their mother-in-law's name and where they live. Like it's really weird. And Cassie, rightly so, says, I know a little about a whole lot, and but not a lot about, or
not
anyway,
a lot about
the reverse. Much. It would probably be better. Anyway, but we say that to ourselves, and that thought has come into your head, like, or somebody's told you, like, oh, Jody, you just don't remember names. You can never remember birthdays. Well, I mean, that thought has come in. It's programming. It's wiring you now. And he's saying, like, you're going to live the rest of your days just clinging to that. Sorry, just watching Brandon. Sorry. This is recorded, which is sorry, bro. For those who don't get it, I don't know if y'all can see Jessica's screen or not. But
Sorry.
her husband.
That's so great. And she's gone.
Okay, I'm gonna try.
Okay.
So that visual aid, that thought, has now programmed me to like Brandon even more than what I recently before I ever did, because he just did something I would totally do.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry, back to it. So we have conscious programming and subconscious programming. Conscious programming are things that are pretty obvious, like the things in your life that are programming you, the things in your life that you're just gonna say, I'm sorry for the half-naked man just walked through my screen. You see, this is why it's good to do book study. You never know
It's true.
what you're gonna get.
You get to know your team a whole lot better.
You get to know your team intimately, obviously. You find out we're bad parents who love Grey's Anatomy, and Jessica's husband likes boxers, not briefs. Anyway.
All right.
Okay, sorry. Bring it back. So conscious ones are one that we're really conscious. We're conscious that we are formed in that those thoughts come. It's like when someone tells you, like at school or when you're a kid or even as an adult, like you're not very good at that, or you're really good at that, and it's a thought that you put in and it programs you. Subconscious programming though happens over time, and it's really a little bit like this covert subconscious stuff happening. And it's a lot of times the things we talk to ourselves. And as you can hear our kid yelling, this is great training. You might want to have to go talk to her. So as a child, we learn to believe. As a child, we learn to, this is fun.
Yeah.
Please tell me I'm not the only one who can hear this. I hope y'all can hear our daughter screaming. Hold on, Cassie's trying to get by.
I can't get by.
She's like, I'm pregnant. I can't get by. Oh, Clementine. All right, here we go. So ultimately, we are in chapter 5. Ultimately, he talks about I'm trying to get this back on track. He gives a weight loss example. He said, now imagine this, like when he met a lady who just lost 125 pounds, which, we see those type of testimonies in places all the time. And he asked the lady, like, how does it feel? Like, now that you've lost 125 pounds? And she goes, it feels like I lost 125 pounds. And he's like, that makes sense because you just lost 125 pounds. And he said, what if you could do that? What if you could lose 125 pounds of negative thoughts? If you could be unshackled by your negative and poor programming? What if you could lose the things that you were taught to believe about yourself at an early age, but shouldn't have? So I thought that was a really great thing. And he says, achieving your goals with faulty programming never will achieve anything. He's like, if you have bad programming, if you have faulty programming, negative programming, you're never going to achieve your goals. We're all operating on broken systems. We're all operating on broken computers expecting to achieve goals. And he says, finally, you need to erase and replace. Erase the bad programming and replace it with positive programming. I thought that was really good. Finally, and again, we'll backtrack and cover a lot of this stuff. But finally, in chapter 6, called The Wall, one of the thoughts that I pulled out of here I thought was interesting. And he pretty much, the concept is we've built a wall of negative thoughts that keep us from getting to where we want to be. He said all thoughts are tied to something we already know. So tomorrow morning when you wake up and you get a new thought comes in, a new programming comes in, if it's brand new to you, it really isn't, because it's tied to something else. It's tied to something in your past. Something, and after you hear these thoughts and as you gain these thoughts, you start building belief into whatever that is. So if it's negative, you're just going to assume it's always going to be negative. And we've talked, people like that. Maybe you're like that. Whenever you hear a certain, this is a really silly example, but if there's a certain band and you thought to yourself, I don't really like that song that they put out 10 years ago. So someone says, hey, have you heard of this band? Oh, yeah, I've heard of them. They're not very good. Now, they may have just come out with like 10 other albums and they're awesome and they're superstars, but you didn't like that one song. So your thought is it's linked to that past experience. And so you're not going to like anything else they put out, even though you really may like that music that they put out now. So he talked about all thoughts are tied to something we already know. The more we believe, though, in something, the more we will accept other ideas which are similar. So the more we believe in something, the more we will accept other ideas which are similar. So the thoughts don't even have to be the same. They could just be similar. And unfortunately, and I don't know why I kept thinking about this, and this is, I don't know why my brain was here. Maybe this is a political science major in me, but and all the things that are happening in our culture right now. But if you believe something a whole lot, and you believe the more about like a particular person or particular group of people, hold on, Noah. Sorry. If you believe about that, if you have a bad experience with a certain culture of people, then I believe that unfortunately, like racism and all those things are spawned because, oftentimes people say, well, that must be how everyone of that culture is like. And so he said, but the more you keep believing that, the more you'll accept other ideas, which may even be the same. They just may be just kind of similar. And so you're just going to have these big groupings of beliefs and thoughts. So, and you end up building a wall, and the negativity keeps coming. He said the human brain will do anything possible that you will tell it to do, which I thought that was really cool. Like, and do you think about it? The human brain being the computer, we input it, no one else does. And he says the human brain will do anything possible you tell it to do if you tell it often enough and strong enough. Mm-hmm. So if you tell your computer, your brain, often that we just had this discussion in one of our chat groups that we're in, and Allie's in, for one of our gym pages and gym lines. And we were talking, and someone says, I'm not a good teacher. Like, that's not my thing. Teaching's not my thing. And if you tell your brain often enough and strong enough that you're not a good teacher, you're never going to be a good teacher. But a lot of the people in this chat stream says, you know what? We were scared to death, too, to teach. We were scared to death to lead our team in whatever training. But we just did it. We did it afraid, which is a phrase we use a lot. We did it afraid. And the more we did it, and the more we told ourselves, we can do this. We can be a good teacher. We have things that people need to hear. And if they believe that, and it's often enough, and it's strong enough, that then they will come away with that, end up being a good teacher.
I think you hear a lot of people say, like, I can't make a video. I can't, I hear that a lot. Like when we say here, post a video, sharing your testimony or your why. And people say, oh, I'm not good at that. Or elevator speeches or meeting new people. People say that all the time. Oh, yeah. I'm not good at meeting new people. Yeah. You may not be right now, but it's because that is a instantaneous negative thought that you have created and then believed and then acted out over and over and over. And until we can recognize that cycle and stop it, stop those thoughts and replace them with the positive thoughts. And it, these affirmations, a lot of times they sound silly, but it is so powerful for your brain to hear these positive thoughts, because those, we don't hear a lot of positive. We don't talk about ourselves positively, very rarely.
It seems prideful.
Right. And we don't really point out the positive things in other people very often. So just how important that is when you
most
are
definitely
trying to change a behavior or an outcome.
So kind of in summary, when we're expanding these chapters, we begin with this idea that there's all these external self-help things that we have, that we have access to. The problem is none of them are permanent because they're all external. They're external is temporary. That has to do with the brain. And none of them, can't remember the third thing you said now. None of them.
Go back to your notes.
Yeah. My goodness, that's terrible. So it's not permanent. It doesn't have to do with the brain. And we have negative programming vocabulary in our heads. And so he took that concept and he grows it to this idea that we learn to believe. We learn to believe in things. We learn to believe in ourselves or not believe in ourselves. We learn to believe in things that people talk about us or what we tell ourselves. We learn that. Since we've learned that, we're dealing with faulty programming. And if the computer, our brain is in the computer, it's received this faulty programming, and you can't operate successfully on faulty programming, so we're going to have to change the programming. And though we build walls and all these things because of the negative beliefs, we can take the thoughts that we get in, the programming thoughts that we have, and change them, or erase and replace and change them, make them good. Well, one of the last things I think it was, and I mentioned this earlier, but I thought it was really, really cool, where he talks about that your subconscious, and he goes into some detail, but for our sake, our subconscious accepts our programming that we give it. It does not know the difference between rich or poor, between healthy and unhealthy. Your subconscious says, when it comes to our business and what we do, your subconscious doesn't know that you're healthy or not. I mean, it is because you tell it is. It is because, or isn't because you've told them that. And so now don't get off track here and think that you can just lie to yourself. That's not what he's saying. Mm-hmm. He's like, like, remember the guy, the Saturday Night Live skit guy, the smiley guy, the counselor, and he's like, you're good enough. You're smart enough. Mm-hmm. Gosh darn it, people like you. Now, that's silly, but there is something kind of to that too as well. That he's saying that if you continue to feed in positive things. Now, a real world application that I'll end with this is that many of you know the color things, the color personalities, red, yellow, blue, green. Now, red is driven, sees the vision. Sometimes will run over people if they need to get to the end. Leader, outspoken, type A. Blue is the life of the party, likes to have fun, likes to travel, spontaneous. Green's analytical. They're the people who are like administrative and has steps. And then you have yellow who, wants everybody to come with them on the journey. They care, more caring and all those things. I used to be very, very red, like incredibly red pops. You can ask Cassie, to the point though, because reds are great and we love reds, and Allie's a red. Probably there's some other people that are reds in the group. Reds are wonderful. But I was one of those reds that I get out of my way. Don't come with me on this journey. This is not, so I was like, get out of my way. And if you don't get out of my way, I'm going to run you over. I don't want to listen to what you have to say. Mm-hmm. I don't want to, it's my way or the highway type thing. And I remember many times Cass and I would leave meeting with friends, and she's like, man, you really dominated that conversation. Could you let someone else talk a little bit, or, we'd be in the meetings and people come around and say, man, are you okay? You seem really angry. And I was like, no, I just want this done. I want this done now. This is how I want it done. And I just kept telling myself, I kind of had having these outer body experiences. I don't like this about me. And now I didn't know the colors back then, but I think if I did, I would say I need a little bit more yellow in me, probably more blue or green. But I just kept telling myself, this is who I am. This is how I'm wired. This is what I'm supposed to be like. To now, then, and about when we started Plexus, and it started way before that, but really when we started Plexus, I started, thinking, this is the kind of person I want to be. This is the kind of person I feel good about being. So, I have a little bit of red, but I really would love a little bit more yellow. And now when I take this, it's predominantly yellow. And again, not one color is better than the other. But it's one of those things that what you say to yourself, what you constantly tell yourself is really what your brain's going to believe and probably much how you're going to act. So anyway, stop recording.